Part of the news this week was shock and awfulness. Sorry for the bad pun. Shock and awfulness in the halls of Congress. Aaron Schock, up-and-coming Republican congressional star, resigned after questions were raised about mileage reimbursements sought on his expense accounts, I guess for total mileage that exceeded the mileage on his vehicle. Now, Aaron Schock has been getting a lot of attention in recent weeks, among other things, for the decorating job that was originally done for free on his congressional office. If an officer of or member of Congress could be impeached for ghastly taste, he would have been out of there long ago. His office was decorated, they said, I guess, in Downton Abbey style. It looked more like Best Little Whorehouse in Texas to me, but maybe that's just me. What's disappointing about all of this, I got to say, is not what happens to one member of Congress with bad taste and bad ethics, although it's always good to get shy of them, as the country folks used to say. But what's disappointing is that there's been so much coverage of Aaron Schock and not very much coverage of the very legalized forms of corruption which dominate Washington politics. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Merriam-Webster's dictionary, their first definition of corruption is, and I quote, impairment of integrity, virtue, or moral principle. Now, one of the things we learned last week from Ryan Grimm and from following up on that story this week is that the legalized revolving door between Congress and highly paid lobbying positions, in other words, every member of Congress, in fact, even presidents of the United States like Bill Clinton, can look forward to becoming very wealthy upon leaving office. That has a corrupting influence on the political process because it leads to impairment of integrity, virtue, or moral principle. Now, another definition of corruption is a departure from the original or from what is pure and correct. Would you not argue that our democracy today has departed significantly from the original as envisioned by the founders of this country? How can we argue that this is the democracy the founders envisioned when money plays such a corrupting role in the political process, just as Thomas Jefferson feared it would? Now, look, today's electoral process is not what the founders envisioned. Today's elected officials see, and by the way, Hill staffers and other staffers as well, see their colleagues getting these lucrative jobs, some as lobbyists, some on boards, and so on. Retired politicians, they provide ample evidence of this process every day. You see them, whether it's Evan Bayh or someone else getting a lobbying position, getting a position representing this or that industry. In a very real sense, continued re-election is less important to a politician than the long game, which leads to wealth after they leave politics. Matt Stoller had a good analogy. He said that elections in many ways are just like regular season games in basketball. They're worth winning, but it's not worth risking an injury. And an injury in this case would be something that prevents you from making a lot of money when you leave office. So as long as money is so deeply embedded in the political process, we are going to have a problem with democracy. Now, on another subject, that of the Republican budgets that came out this week from the House and Senate side of the aisle, I would say this. It is not often that I find myself agreeing on fiscal matters with a congressional Republican, but it's hard to argue with a recent comment by Representative Rob Woodall of the House Budget Committee. He's a Republican from Georgia, and he said a budget is a moral document. It talks about where your values are. That's certainly true. So what should we make of these Republican budgets? They hurt seniors. They use the disabled as pawns. They punish the needy. They pamper the wealthy. And they use deceit to achieve their goals, which is all based on a selfish agenda for the wealthy and powerful. There's a lot we could say about these two proposals, but they are certainly moral documents of a sort. What do they do for Social Security and Medicare? On Social Security, both the House and Senate documents mislead the public about the state of the program's finances. Now, we've gone into that at length, but short version, let's not forget $2.8 trillion in the trust funds for Social Security, and we could address any future shortfall through lifting the payroll tax cap and a couple of other measures designed to rebalance inequality in our society. Now, these GOP budgets also conveniently fail to mention that we could fix these programs and expand their benefits, that Americans are willing to pay more, a few dollars more each week in payroll tax in order to get more in Social Security benefits when they retire. Now, why don't they mention it? Because, of course, any proposal that would do that would also inconvenience their wealthy patrons. So instead of stepping on the third rail of American politics, which is Social Security, these Republicans avoid specifics and give a lot of talk about something they call bipartisanship. Maybe we'll form another bipartisan commission to cut Social Security. Maybe we'll get a bipartisan proposal because a lot of Democrats are looking for that post-game employment as well, and maybe they'll go along with us in cutting Social Security. Bipartisanship is the Washington equivalent of those Agatha Christie novels where all the suspects turn out to have committed the murder because they hoped that way none of them would be found guilty. Now, the message out of Maryland and elsewhere is if you step up and say you want to cut Social Security, as Chris Van Hollen did by endorsing the Sips and Bowles plan, it will come back to bite you. So word to the wise for Democrats, do not propose cutting Social Security. Word to the wise to the public, keep the pressure on our politicians, and keep listening to this program. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.